Welcome to episode 89 of the Through a Therapist Eyes podcast. Chris, my friend, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right, man, from the Charlotte, North Carolina area. I think we got episode 88, though, man.
I think you're off one.
I think I'm off one.
Uh-huh.
I'm usually off, but what can I say?
You definitely are.
Through a Therapist's Eyes, the podcast coming to you again. He is Craig. I am Chris, where we invite you to see the world through the lens of a mental health and substance abuse therapist. The goal to create emotional growth through the medium of this podcast, being aware it's not the delivery of therapy services in any way. Feedback and discussion on throughatherapisteyes.com. A little foreshadowing for our audience. We're going to be doing some new things on there. Stay tuned. Stay interested. It's going to be different soon, I'm willing to say. Mr. Graves, this is the human emotional experience. What shall we do?
Figure it out together.
All right. So we are, what is this? Since you're good with numbers, sir, what is this? The 4th, 5th, 6th different coronavirus special edition?
I think it's about 5.
Yeah.
I think this is the 5th one. Yeah.
We got a good one, I think, today on an aspect that, I haven't heard mentioned at all in the news, man. The reality of it is people have talked about 12-step meetings and stuff. You heard people kind of whisper about that and how it's a complicated factor.
I haven't heard that in relation to the quarantine or the virus.
Oh, so you haven't even heard that?
I have not.
It's so it gets so buried, man. Well, how about residential treatment facilities for substance abusers and how that's being affected by said here Corona-19?
I haven't heard much about that either, to be honest with you.
It's buried, man. It's
huge. I can imagine that's a big deal, but I haven't heard anything about it.
And, one of the things I've liked about this coronavirus stuff, too, is we've had, kind of a lot, I think, several different guests, and I'm enjoying having kind of a flurry of guests coming in to deal with it. Would you believe we got another one, man?
I can believe it.
You believe it? We have Miss Amanda K. Otherwise, I guess, ma'am, you're known as Mandy. Is that right?
That's what my friends call me, yes.
Mandy Baker, MS, and she has an LCDC. Craig, over the nation, we have all these kind of different letters behind her name. I'm not even sure which one that one is because you're in Texas. Is that right?
I am in Texas, Austin, Texas, coming live from BRC Recovery.
Sweet. And that is LCDC. What is that? I don't even know, and I'm in the field.
It is the Chemical Dependency Counselor certification here in the state, kind of like a KDAC or, I'm not even sure what it is where you guys are.
LCSW and LPC and we have a LCSA. I mean, it's crazy. It's funny. I actually was sitting there with a doctor at one point in a marketing thing years ago, and oh my God, I felt horrible because he asked me that question. What do those letters mean? And I looked at him, I was like, I forget, I said something, and I just wilted like, I gave a very poor answer. I'll just say that. It's embarrassing. Anyway, so she is Craig, the Chief Clinical Officer for BRC Recovery Family of Programs. Also, formerly has done so many other things. CEO of the ranch at Dovetree, the Vice President of Clinical Services at Origins Recovery Center, co-founder and clinical director of Windhaven Counseling Center. And it gets more interesting, Craig. Prior to her career and all that treatment industry stuff, Associates Director for Grants and Special Projects at the nationally recognized Center for the Study of Addiction and Recovery. More letters, Craig. You ready for this? CSAR. Anyway, she worked as the lead project manager for the CSAR's efforts to implement recovery services systems to institutions of higher education across the nation. Really, that's got to be some cool stuff, man.
That was a lot of fun.
Research for grant writing, yes. With her colleagues at Texas Tech, Mandy managed the development of multiple recovery support systems in colleges and universities across the nation. Their work sparked the Recovery Campus movement, which has significantly impacted the ways in which colleges and universities address addiction and support recovery on their campuses. So her deep understanding and study of the 18 to 27-year-old demographic resulted in numerous publications, academic journals, books, curricula, and popular press outlets. Mandy, I like to say I love to meet researchers and people into research because I hate that stuff, but it's so valuable.
Absolutely. You kind of either like it or you don't.
I'm in the don't category. I'm a clinician. I like to talk to people too much than the research, but I love it. Thank you for all the work that you've done. Seriously, that sounds very impressive. It is super cool to have you on the show. How did I do with that, and what did I miss?
Not a lot. It's always one of those things when you hear your bio read or an introduction of that sort, it starts to feel a little embarrassing after a minute. So I'm really honored to be here, and thank you guys so much for having me on.
Yeah, we met recently, I think on LinkedIn in some way, and another sort of plug for the audience. I think that we have another one of your colleagues that's going to be joining us. You guys have actually, Craig, these guys are plugged in a certain way, not like he's super authority or anything, but he's pretty well accomplished, I would have to say. But you guys have worked with, Dr. Phil, and the BRC Recovery Network seems to be really a pretty good leader in what we do in treatment. Is that how long you guys been around? And tell us a little bit about BRC.
Yeah, so the BRC family of programs is actually 4 different programs that are all located kind of throughout the greater Austin area. And they started out with one campus, which was originally known as Mark Houston Recovery Center. And Mark Houston is a well-known entity in the 12-step world, and started a men's only treatment facility. And since then, we've added a women's program to that. We've added a young adult male program. We've added a trauma intensive program. And then we have added a constellation of aftercare support services through what we call Segue, all throughout the Austin area. So we have about 200 beds under management in the greater Austin area. We really pride ourselves on taking the hard cases. We were originally developed for chronic relapsers and treatment-resistant clients, and so we're really rooted in that foundation. At the same time, have over the past 10 years really worked a lot to develop clinical sophistication and all of those things that are so important to support all of the things that we're seeing coming in right now. I've listened to you guys' podcast, and a lot of interesting information there, kind of listening from the compounded trauma versus event trauma,
right,
into the pieces on human trafficking. And as all of those things are legitimately hitting our doors, we have to be prepared. So it's really great to have outlets and resources like your podcast, because it kind of can point us all in an educational direction of like, okay, well, this is interesting, where can I learn more? So certainly appreciate the work that you guys are doing as well.
Oh, thank you for those kind words. Yeah, educational. But I'd like to point out, Craig, we have fun as well as educate, right?
We do.
There's no other way to learn.
Absolutely. No, it's impressive. And Craig, what's cool about that, honestly, because Mandy, Craig kind of is not in the field to, especially and whatnot, which is what's cool about him on the show is kind of getting the regular person's idea of what's going on. And Craig, you got to realize, man, like when you hit inpatient recovery and whatnot, these are pretty hard cases, but it's even harder when you have multiple components kind of going on. Like, it's cool to hear you say, Mandy, that you've got specifically for what I used to call years ago the tweeners, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. These guys, it used to be, there was such a gap. There's just nothing for somebody that's, 22 years old, except for go to the, the recovery unit where there's nothing but 40 and 50-year-olds sitting around, and they're like, oh my gosh, and then, specific towards trauma and that type of thing. So that's really cool that you guys are plugging gaps for women and special populations as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We've just really revamped our young adult male program to kind of start looking at, I guess what popular literature is calling the boy problem, or toxic masculinity and the expressions of that. And so it's been a lot of fun to really kind of dive into that and, get it working and help some more people.
That's cool. So let's get into the COVID specific stuff here in just a couple seconds. But I want to kind of start out with a couple of broader things just to get kind of our audience aware, because a lot of people that I think are listening to our show don't really know rehab centers. We actually did a show. You might appreciate this one, Mandy. The what was it called, Craig? The Nut House or something we did with inpatient stays. You remember?
I don't remember. I have to look it up.
Oh, really? Yeah, we did one. And the reason why I remember it so much so is because we used, as a promo, a little intro on Dr. Demento's They're Coming to Take Me Away stuff.
Yeah, of course.
It was so funny to me. But anyway, we talked about that as an inpatient stay, but we haven't really talked about rehab a whole lot yet. So I want to do a little general and educate our audience kind of about that. And do just a real quick review and a little bit of generalized addiction things. Sure. Starting out with the idea of simply what would you say addiction is? I like posing that question because I think fundamentally people kind of do get confused about that and a little bit weirded out about that and how that works. So what would you say, like, Mandy's definition of addiction, if you had to be pinned down?
My goodness, that's the start with a hard question, right? I guess if I had to define addiction, it would be, the process by which our brains become addicted to a particular feeling or chemical, right? And they want more and more of it, even to the detriment of our own survival, basically.
Nice.
So,
yeah.
I look at it a lot from a brain-based lens, and really thinking about all of the things that are going on when we ingest alcohol or other substances, when we participate in other activities that sort of spark the dopamine response in the brain, like gambling or sex or all of those things. I mean, it's just basically when the survival mechanism of our brain is haywire, basically. For a Texas word, I think you guys probably know that word.
Haywire. Yes, we get haywire. I like what you say with brain-based lens. The disease model from Minnesota. The Minnesota model from way back before you and I were probably born, at least certainly. Well, anyway, no age jokes. That one just bombed. It bombed in the middle, Craig. But I mean, do you guys kind of operate that way insofar as, brain-based lens to me means like, there really is something going on that's different biologically that's really driving something that we totally don't understand.
Absolutely. And it doesn't happen in a vacuum, I mean, I always tell people, the clients in particular, that we've kind of got two sides of this. We've got your genetic loading, and then we have the experiences that you go through in your life. And neither is executed without the other, really. I mean, there are people who go through terrible events and don't become addicts and alcoholics or substance use disordered individuals. There are people who have that genetic predisposition and, they never fire the gun, so to speak.
Andy, do we have to say substance use, or can we say substance dependence?
We can say, I don't know, I'm just trying to be PC here. They change it about every 5 years, and we have to reorient to everything.
I know. I miss the days of alcohol abuse diagnosis, alcohol dependence diagnosis. It makes so much more sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, now we've got, mild, moderate, and severe.
Yes. Now, also, I'm curious in a general sense, have you seen the growing nature in the substance use field with, the combination of mental health factors and substance abuse factors? I mean, as you probably know, I've been honest on this show about my terrible frustration with that separation and great divide in our field. Have you seen more joining, particularly on a rehab level?
Absolutely. And we work really hard at this, and so do a lot of my colleagues and partners in the effort to kind of, stem the tide. But we can't really work through one without working on the other. And I think for a long time, we tried to silo those two things. We tried to say, well, if we resolve the mental health problem, then the substance use disorder will resolve. Or if we resolve the substance use problem, then the mental health disorder will resolve. And the truth is that, you got to do both. And, there's just so much more that we know about addiction now in 2020 than we knew when I got into the field, 16, 17 years ago. There's just been, a lot of rapid development in the science of addiction. And, I think what we know now is that, we wouldn't try to treat someone with a heart attack and ignore their hypertension.
Right.
That's kind of, where we're at here. We can't, just say, well, stop smoking crack and hopefully your psychotic disorder will go away. You could. That happens.
It might.
Sometimes.
It might. Craig, what do you think about that? Chime in on that in a general sense, and let's jump into the COVID factors that have kind of jumped in. But he's kind of listened over the last, year or so, right? As far as I've asked that question several times, and for that reason, how do you see the general idea, or actually, let me come back to you, get your brain working on that. One more general thing for you, Mandy, and then we'll go to Craig in the idea of rehab. Help our audience understand, what the heck is this rehab stay? Why would I go to a rehab facility?
Sure. People ask me that question a lot. And the best answer that I can give them is that, the very nature of addiction means that we can't stop doing something on our own. And sometimes we need some type of separation. And rehab, for all practical purposes, is a great separator. So if I have something that is engaging me biologically over and over and over again, it becomes really difficult for me to step away from that without some type of intervention that removes me from whatever that is. If I can't stop going to the casino, somebody needs to stop me so that I can then get treatment. If I can't stop using cocaine, I need to get to a place where people aren't using cocaine. And so I think there's two main things about rehab that make them important, particularly residential or inpatient rehab, which is the kind of facilities that I work in currently. The biggest factor is that we're taking somebody out of an environment which they have created to support an addiction and putting them into an environment that is specifically created to support recovery. And that environmental change over a period of time is often long enough for their brains to sort of clear from the fog and then begin to do the work with clinicians and therapists and, recovery mentors and all kinds of doctors, to treat those mental health illnesses. But sometimes we have to pick people up and put them in a new environment. And for people particularly that, are treatment resistant or have a long history of relapse, sometimes inpatient residential is really the best option.
Right. It's funny to me as an outpatient clinician, Mandy and Craig, I'll say this and turn it over to see what your brain's doing. But it's funny, when I meet with somebody in a therapy experience and they have not been to rehab yet, I spend so much time in early recovery, sort of, because I do kind of believe in a teaching model and what we do to make therapy effective, literally teaching the language, what does relapse triggers mean? What is relapse prevention? What is a trigger in the first place? How do I do a recovery network? What is this 12-step? I do so much to Craig, but when somebody comes out of rehab, dude, they're already speaking the entire language. You know what I mean by language, Mandy?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Recovery is a culture.
Yeah, it's right.
It really is.
Yeah. Craig, is this the first time we've talked about rehab centers and inpatient facilities for SA? Is that a true statement?
Yeah, this is the first time we've talked about
I can't believe that
topic on the show. How do you set them up for success when they go home? Because if they go right back into the same environment they came from, and I know people who've gone through this, right? Mm-hmm. I got a friend of mine that went through rehab 3 or 4 times. And I'm like, dude, move to Montana and work on a dude ranch for the rest of your life. Because seriously, he would come home in the morning from rehab. That afternoon, junkies would be calling him, trying to get them some drugs. 2 weeks later, he's right back in the same spot.
Sure.
Right.
So, is there a process to set somebody up for success when they leave there, or how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the problems with the way we look at rehab, so to speak, and America in particular, is that we look at it as sort of an acute model, right? It's like, things are so bad, we gotta pick you up, we gotta put you in here, we're gonna stabilize you, we're gonna send you back out. And addiction is really more effectively treated in a chronic illness model. So in a lot of the same ways that we would try to teach somebody how to overcome, obesity or diabetes, or things that you can do to help your asthma, over a course of time, are the same kind of things that we need to do with people who have addictive illness. And with that, a lot of the research shows that longer is better. And it doesn't mean that you have to be inpatient for a year, but, it's kind of like these partnerships, that I would imagine that Chris has with some treatment providers in you guys' area, where we kind of use a step down approach, we get them in, we stabilize them, we start to build skills, and then we put them in a safe container where they can practice these skills. And then over time, we hope that they become sort of a part of a lifestyle. And a lot of it, a lot of it is about identity. Like, who am I as a person? If I am overly identified as a drug dealer or a drug user or a barfly or a fill in the blank, a high roller, if I'm overly identified with that, then it's really hard to strip me away from my whole personality, and so when I come back, it's a lot easier for me to put that on. It's one of the reasons that 12-step programs and other fellowships, are very useful, because they sort of build that social network around somebody that helps them to support this new identity, as opposed to, not having anything. The number one need of people in the world is to be loved and accepted, and connected, above all else. And we're going to find that connection wherever it's available, even if it's not the healthiest thing.
So I'm just going to poke fun real quick, Mandy. You said we put them in a safe container. I just want to point out, Craig, that's not like I don't know, what kind of container is that?
A figurative
put my friend
one.
in a container.
Oh, you think? You
should have.
That would have helped.
Yeah.
And
that would work.
story.
That's a container, right?
It's a very sad story.
So it sounds like you guys are pretty supportive of the 12-step community and that type of thing. I've kind of heard it quoted even before I became a clinician. It works best for most. And so a lot of times 12-step communities are kind of wrapped around and incorporated and embedded into programming for treatment.
Sure. I mean, it's the most widely available free service in the world, actually, probably, to help people overcome this problem. I mean,
it started with 2 dudes in Akron, Ohio, and now is literally a worldwide
phenomenon. Sure.
Phenomenon. Yeah, it's amazing. And how might I say has COVID-19 affected that? Not at all, right? My gosh. I told you, Craig, I have a client that I've talked to, and she has, Mandy, she's amazed me, where she's very active in the program, and they're working a great recovery network. And people are literally in the 12-step circles meeting around the world in what I am just fascinated by on the online not marketability, but agility of the community, right? Have you seen that? Like, that's amazing.
Absolutely. It's been phenomenal. People from all over the country have, quickly pivoted to digital platforms, to go-to meetings, to Zoom meetings, to online phone calls. We quickly pivoted. We have a very robust alumni program. And so we quickly pivoted to moving all of that online. And it was really a powerful experience, the first time we did that, to see 50, 60 little tiles on the Zoom screen of people coming in from all over the place. The bulk of them were located in Austin, but one of the things we realized is that, we've got alumni all over the country and a few international, and some of them jumped on because for the first time that service was available to them. So, while there have been some definite challenges with COVID, there have been some real silver linings of things that probably we wouldn't have thought about until this happened.
And likely will stick around.
And likely will stay, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that we will continue, even when we can begin to meet in person again, to use those Zoom platforms so that people can access services easier.
It's got to be an amazing reality on a positive note, when Mandy, you know how powerful it is when you sit down for the very first time, you get your butt in a seat in a church or a gathering somewhere, and you utter those amazing words for the first time, right? Mm-hmm. Hi, I'm Chris, and I'm an alcoholic. Wow, right?
Yeah.
You feel so alone prior to that. After that, it's like, this, you could be a part of the group. Like you're connected and loved. How about the power of that? I'm curious if you've seen somebody in early recovery, maybe the first time they've been in a recovery network, and they've uttered those words for the very first time in their life. And they've literally done that on a meeting where it's heard across the world. Like, I'm curious, have you seen that?
It has not been my experience as of yet. I am a member of a 12-step fellowship, and one of the things that was so cool last night, I hopped on a meeting with an old group that I used to belong to when I was, in my 20s, right? And I'm not anymore. But there were people on there that were calling in from, different places in Texas, someone from Puerto Rico. And so, you're connecting with people you haven't seen or heard from in a long time, people from, islands, people from
Australia,
Europe, Australia,
Uzbekistan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And my point is that when I realized about the positive impact of, the epidemic, like I said, it's a powerful thing to realize, like, I could be a part of this community, but it's humbling and very grounding to know, like, not only am I not alone with something that I felt terribly alone with, I'm with people that are dealing with very similar things around the world.
Around the world. Mm-hmm.
Like, as the world shrinks almost with some of this stuff, that's a very potential positive outcome of COVID-19. I
think so too. I think that people will be really grateful to get back to in-person things.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that there will be some newfound wonder, if you will, from a lot of what's happened.
So has everything moved to online? Do you still have people in facilities?
So we absolutely do. We still are accepting patients in all of our facilities. It has been an interesting challenge to do that safely.
Let's just pause right there real quick.
Okay.
Like, that's an important reality, it feels like to me. And like, Craig, yeah, you're asking, right? Like, do you still have people in these facilities? The world needs to know, like, yes. Because people are needing that and fearful of that and not engaging that, I fear.
Well, go ahead with the testing piece. I'd like to hear what you guys are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, that the need for inpatient treatment has not gotten any lower. In fact, in a lot of ways, it's gotten more significant. Particularly, we found with our alcoholic population. I don't know what the stats are for other states, but in Texas, liquor, beer, and wine sales have gone up 55% since the month of March.
Wow.
And that has posed some unique challenges to us because, the detox of patients using alcohol has gotten a lot more involved because they're drinking a lot more. But yeah, back to the kind of, how we admit patients to the facility. One of the things that is incredibly important about a new person coming into one of our programs is that they feel welcomed and that they feel accepted and that they feel supported. It's a very lonely and scary thing to walk into a treatment center. And one of the difficulties that we've had to address with that is the fact that when somebody comes in, we do have the ability to provide antibody tests, and we do have the ability to provide the PCR nasal swab testing, and we do that on every admitting patient. The problem is those PCR results take about 24 to 48 hours to get in. So during that time, we have to ask this new person who's walked into the facility to isolate in a room by themselves. We bring them their food. We check on them in full personal protective gear.
Wow.
You know, and we, a lot of the normal things that we do, like assign them a buddy that has to stay within 10 feet of them 24 hours for the first 24 hours to help them feel welcome, go over the rules, orient them. I mean, all of that's kind of on pause. We have purchased several tablets that we hand to them when they come in as they go into the isolation room, where they can get on and participate in the groups via Zoom apps or other, we actually use another platform that's HIPAA compliant, so that they can log in and participate remotely, even though they may be only 20 feet away from where the group is. They can't actually go into it until we get those negative results back. And so that certainly poses some challenges for making people feel comfortable and welcome and a part of when they get here. So we've had to be pretty creative and inventive and work through a lot of different protocols to get that done. You know, for the first month of, you know, what people might call the outbreak or the pandemic or whatever, we didn't have testing available.
At all? I was going to ask that. Yeah. When did it, have you always had it for everybody?
No, we haven't. I mean, we spent a lot of man hours on the phone, calling labs, trying to get access, trying to set up, talking to the health department. But you know, that's a worldwide problem. It's not unique necessarily. Well, not a worldwide, it's a countrywide problem. Access to testing. And, you know, we feel really fortunate that we landed with the laboratory that we did, who can get these tests to us and turn around and keep us in supply. But it took about a month for us to get there.
So do people come to your facilities on their own, or are they court ordered to come? Why do they show up, I guess is the question.
Yeah, there's lots of reasons. You know, some people just decide that they've had enough. Their life is going downhill. They want to get off the crazy train or whatnot. Sometimes they come to us because of legal interactions. They could be court ordered. They could, you know, have gotten arrested for something and been given an option between, in Texas, we have what's called substance abuse felony punishment options, or they may have chosen to go to treatment instead of a lockup facility. Sometimes people's husbands, wives, kids, spouses, partners will intervene on them and say, hey, your behavior is unacceptable, and if you don't get help, I'm not going to be able to stick around much longer. So people come to us for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes therapists like Chris make referrals to us, or physicians, attorneys.
Have you seen like maybe a decrease or any fluctuation in the people who are coming after this thing started? I think people are maybe scared to come, right? I mean,
I think it's fair to say that, you know, we have seen a decline in call volume of people calling to get help. And, you know, we've been really fortunate in that, you know, the census in our programs has remained fairly stable. It's fluctuated maybe, you know, plus or minus 5 from what we're used to. But I think there are a couple of driving factors in that. I think one is that, at least in Texas, and again, we draw clients from all over the country, we had a lot of travel restrictions put in place. And so for actually, you know, from middle of March until about 2 hours ago today, they just lifted the travel ban. We could not, anybody coming from New York, California, Washington, New Jersey, Connecticut, Miami, Detroit, anywhere in Louisiana, Chicago.
Jeez.
So you get clients from all those places?
We do.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And, when they limited that and said that there was an enforceable quarantine, basically, if you flew into the airport, you were met at the gate like you were going through customs almost, by a DPS trooper who said you had to quarantine for 14 days or face $1,000 fine or up to 180 days in jail. And that's a pretty big deterrent for people who probably may already have a little involvement with law enforcement agencies. They don't really want to have to register their whereabouts when they walk off the plane.
Right.
That whole thing's crazy with I don't want to get political, but bad people have been let out of jail because of the coronavirus. Yet people who are breaking the rules are going to jail for breaking the rules. It's ridiculous.
Oh, we can get a little political. I have no problem with that.
We can. We can switch over to some of my favorite conspiracy theory podcast channels here afterwards too.
That'd be fun. Yeah,
you did say that when we were talking yesterday or so. I got so many thoughts flowing through my head, and I want to say this before I lose it. I really appreciate the way you put a voice to the powerful experience of needing to feel accepted and okay. I mean, as well as I do, addicted people that, Craig, by the way, joke alert. Yeah. Only about 5% come from self-referral. That's sort of a joke, but not really, but they're pounding their last beers in the parking lot. But literally people like they're because of the difficulty in presenting. I mean, you think it's hard to come to a therapy session, Craig, and the shame that you feel and the difficulty of like, oh my God, what's going to happen to me there? Like coming to your facility, that is huge. And man, I hadn't thought about in my own little world here in my little therapy office, how powerfully difficult that must be for people to approach treatment, being quarantined and dealing like, individual alone like that just shakes my clinical brain a little bit. That's terrible.
Yeah. It's hard, I mean, again, our staff have been incredible and amazing and willing to, suit up and show up and literally suit up in
right.
PPE and walk in there and just sit down and be like, hey, I know you can't get out there with them, but I can be in here with you. What do you need? How are we going to get through this? We have been very fortunate, and I think I would be remiss not to give the team that works here a huge compliment in the sense that none of them have wavered in their commitment to, help people.
Well, you know what? Thank you for that. And you can do that. And I want to take a pause in a moment and thank you for what you're doing. Because I have a sneaking suspicion you was one of those folks on the daggum phone at 1 o'clock in the morning trying to get the testing. And I talked to you on the phone and you talked about pivoting. I think I've heard the word pivot more than I've heard that word in the entire NBA basketball season, because you've been pivoting, dancing, and moving and creating. Craig, I think she's pretty much responsible for creating all these protocols and the things that you've had to deal with. I mean, man, this must have been a heck of a 2-3 month period for you.
It's been a stressful time for all of us. I mean, for the leadership team that I work with on a daily basis, who, have consumed and digested immense amounts of research and set up our testing protocols. And, I'm fortunate in that I'm not, the nursing staff who has to show up and like shove those Q-tips up everybody's noses and things like that. But we try to have a little levity around it. And I was talking with my CEO yesterday, and he said, I think that a year from now, we're going to look back at this time and say, wow, I cannot imagine how much stress we were actually under then, but you know this, Chris. I mean, you get in front of a client, you get in the room, you just do what you have to do. I mean, and that's what our team has done here. And that's what I've tried to do. That's what we've all tried to do. It's just, got to do what we've got to do. This won't last forever, or maybe it will, but let's hope not.
You know what? You're right. And just to highlight that a little bit, you're right. Because Craig, I think I've said on the show before, I was honest about it. As a clinician, you kind of learn how to, compartmentalize your own emotions a lot. Every now and again, I'll really take somebody home in my head and in my heart, and that was a tough case or something. But for all intents and purposes, I can answer my family and friends, and they're like, "Dude, how could you do that all day long? Listen to people's problems, And I'm like, I don't know. Yeah, like you just do. You manage that. But I'll tell you, when you go in there with your own emotion in place as well, like Mandy, I mean, the whole first, 2-3 weeks of dealing with this, I'm managing my own fear, my own, like, what's going on here? Is this, trying to get your arms wrapped around this? It's stressful. So you have your own emotion and all the normal stuff. And I'll tell you what, I was leaving exhausted, licking the floor for a while, just like, God, wow.
Mandy, have you had people who've tested positive?
We have, yes.
And what do you do? Do they still get treated in some form or fashion?
They do. I mean, we made a commitment that addiction kills as many, if not more people annually than COVID. And so, that we were going to continue the battle on that front as well. When we have had individuals who have tested positive, we have, it depends. If they're in our residential program, we actually set up a separate facility where positive clients go. We have a team of staff that have volunteered to man or woman that facility, and they continue with the program that they're in. So they have some live in-person groups with the staff that's working over there. And then for, some of the other groups that are a little bit more educational in nature, they zoom into whatever program they're, situated in. And we just go until they follow our, the 14-day quarantine and 2 negative tests. And, then we sanitize all their stuff and send them back to the program that they started in. If they're in sober living, we have some quarantine.
Sober living is where you're after rehab and you stay there for more months at a time and whatnot.
Yeah, and we send them over there, and we have purchased pulse oximeters and blood pressure cuffs and all those kind of things. They check in daily with our medical team via telemedicine. They log their vitals 4 times a day. If we see certain changes, we get them in the car and take them to the hospital. Thank goodness nobody in our care has had to be hospitalized from this illness. And, it has, what they say, necessity is the mother of invention. And so, every time something comes up, we just pivot. And
there it is again.
Yeah, there it is again. I used to play basketball, so that's fun.
Nice.
But it's been a very fluid experience, I would say. And the same kind of thing has happened. We closed our campuses, no visitation, no tours, no marketing events, no anything. And that's been, I think, probably one of the most heartbreaking things for me about this is that, we have long-term programs. Some of our programs are 90 to 120 days. And since this started and we closed those campuses, there have been families who have sent their loved ones to us who have not been able to see them at all.
Wow.
We do the family programming online, but by law and by choice, we can't have 75 people come onto our property and congregate in a small space and run that risk of an outbreak.
So let me set that up a little bit. Boy, man, what are you in my head, Mandy? You're a good therapist. She's in my head, Craig. She knew I was going there. I'm scared now. No, just kidding. Listen, so to set that up a little bit, yeah, we kind of when I started getting aware of what's going on in the 90s and the 80s, we really in the substance abuse field began to realize, especially in rehabs, like, you've got to have a family program. I mean, there's a family component to all this. I think we did a show about family dynamics with substance abuse, and that's become a staple and important part. To go back to your original question, Craig, of what do you do when you get home? Well, we now are really adept in the field. I think I could say, Mandy, that we know family dynamics need to be treated as well. Still probably not up to as much as we need it to be, but you will have family days and family therapy programs. You'll have people doing structural family therapy strategies in units and facilities. They're introduced really dynamically to like what's going to happen when you come home from treatment. I just had a teenage come home from treatment, and they're pulling in, their brother and incorporating them into therapy sessions while they're still at treatment, getting ready to come home. It was so cool. So we now know that we do a lot of that and how important of a component that is. But man, what are we doing now with all of that? How have we pivoted there, right?
Yeah, it has been an interesting exercise. So again, thank goodness for Zoom and other platforms like it. 2 months ago, we set up our entire family program online, basically. Our family department, who are fantastic, got in there and put everything into an online platform. They found specialized Zoom links, and the family members get on there from wherever they are in the world, and they have some education, and we've even done some multifamily process groups with them via Zoom, and let them talk and let them ask the questions, and and then we do sort of, family therapy via telemedicine as well, which isn't totally novel to this instance. I mean, if you're doing regular therapy with somebody from far away, you might use that platform anyway, but this is kind of the first time that we've done it in a group facilitated platform. And, it's an approximator of the real thing, but I think the families have been appreciative of having time to talk to one another, because just like we want the addicts to feel supported and included and normal, the families need to have that same experience. They need to be able to see that, this isn't just something that's happening to my kid or to my husband, or I don't need to blame my parenting. I don't need to be ashamed. This is,
I, as a parent, am not alone either.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I mean, connection is really what fights addiction, and
there's a quote.
Same thing for the family.
Is it any, I mean, obviously it's different, but is it, as far as the recovery process, I'm assuming, like you said, the connection is necessary. So not being able to physically be in the same room or hug a family member or a son or daughter or spouse, is that hindering the recovery process in any way?
It may be too soon to tell. I hope not. And I think that, inpatient treatment providers around the country are doing the very best they can to get it to that place. I mean, I think that there are some things, of course, and Chris, you may agree or disagree, but I think there are some really hard things sometimes that are best said face to face, as opposed to screen to screen or, phone to phone. And so we've just encouraged our team to be sensitive around those things and to help clients, discern, okay, what is important to say right now versus what is important to say the next time I get to sit down with them face to face, and those types of things.
Yeah, I'll tell you my 2 cents on that. And Mandy, I would not have thought this 3 months ago at all. I think I've said it on the show. It was some point during the COVID shows, but obviously face to face is the standard. That's the way we want to engage, treatment in our field. And I don't see that going away. I hope it doesn't go away, because I feel strongly about that. But I used to say there was a little bit of a step down, in the powerful connection that you can have on Skype or, video conferencing. It's pretty adequate. I would have said it's a way big step down on the teletherapy.
Yeah.
I am shocked at some of the teletherapy sessions I've had.
Sure.
I mean, I would not, and I would have fought it. I mean, I would have argued with it. I would have felt like I'm making a good argument. Teletherapy is not as effective. I would have said, and I was wrong. It absolutely is. Mm-hmm. In my view, I've been shocked about that. I was going to ask you, I'm glad this came up because I wanted to see if you've experienced that much at all.
Yeah, I think that if we were to take a poll of the staff here, I think we would say kind of some of them would say, I think it's great. I think it's working just fine. I don't have any issues. And then I've got some who would say, I can't do it this way. I need to be able to read body language and feel energy and, different things like that. My own personal experience is that when I have engaged in therapy for myself, which I think is important for all therapists to do,
right,
consistently or from time to time, I have found that I do better face to face because I tend to be easily distracted. We'll put it that way. But I have also seen, some people do really well with it. And I think we're talking a lot about like personalities and preferences and all of those kinds of things, because like some people, a little bit of distance, maybe even if that is sort of artificially induced, they're a little bit more comfortable in the therapy room. I think
they open up more. Yeah.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. It's still by far the standard is going to be face to face because there is so much more that goes in with that. But I've just been very surprised. I just remember one time very particular, I'm talking with a teenager. And I think it's also very helpful, by the way, the telephonic therapy modalities, meeting somebody and having a few sessions at least to start. I mean, that's important because I know these people that I'm talking to. But this teenager, I hung up the phone and I thought, and then I went to my secretary, my office staff, and I said, that was the best therapy session I've had with that kid to date.
That's awesome.
I know. I was like on the phone, like, wow.
I think that if I were seeing a therapist, online would be fine with me. Like, over a Zoom would be cool. If I were going through a process where I was trying to beat addiction and I weren't able to have a physical connection with my family and children, I think that would be that'd be a different story.
It's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think Craig, I think to that point, I mean, I think it has been incredibly difficult on the people who have kids, and we have moms and dads in treatment all the time, and I think for them, it has posed an even greater struggle than say, not being able to talk to your mom in person or your dad in person, but, as a parent, I can't even imagine what that must be like.
Yeah. Right.
You might be interested, Mandy, another show to check out or your colleagues and stuff with the family program. We had Linda Hacker. Am I saying that name right? Oh my gosh. Craig, save me. She wrote an awesome book, Light as a Feather, and from a mom's perspective on her son who had gotten heroin addiction and whatnot. And it was a very powerful from her perspective and what she went through with treatment and, feeling left out and feeling, the struggle of getting the right treatment and how to engage it. And, it's a big deal, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, especially at our young adult program where they're not quite launched all the way, where we're looking at the tweens and those kinds of things. And, a lot of heroin addiction over there. A lot of
Do you not see that over there as much?
I mean, it's
because it has gotten big around here, man. I mean, it's amazing to me.
Yeah, it's really interesting to sort of watch trends, and, 10 years ago, everybody was talking about methamphetamine and enforcement action was all about methamphetamine. And, now it's all about opiates and opioids. And so, whenever the law cracks down on something else, like the other one, it's like whack-a-mole, something else kind of pops back up. And so we're starting to see things that I haven't seen since the late 90s, cocaine. People were coming in addicted to powder cocaine. And I'm like, I didn't even know they still made powder cocaine. Where did that come from?
Our area used to be, I would jokingly but seriously call it the Xanax capital of the world. I mean, it just seemed like everybody was popping footballs and bars and Xanax milligrams times 10. I mean, it was nuts. And now you just people aren't popping pills. They're not eating pills much.
Yeah.
All right, we have so much to talk to. I need to get to another topic. I'm sorry, I got to transition. Trauma in recovery, right? Like, we know there's a big connection with, rehab and the battles and wars on the streets in our heads and in our hearts with addiction, and, how we go around guns and violence and dealers. And I mean, on and on this stuff goes. And, and then you just deal with the, sexual molestations and the childhood traumas and, PTSD for all sorts of reasons. Sure. Well, we've talked about trauma on the show as well. You mentioned compound trauma versus simple or individual trauma experiences. This COVID-19 reality, I would suppose, just buzzes those trauma receptors. I mean, you're literally like just getting into the car and stopping to get gas. Your senses are tingling. Like, can I touch the gas pump? Particularly in the beginning of this. I know I'm exaggerating a little bit, but like that first month and two, and still very much now, I just went to Walmart and I saw people freaking out. I didn't speak to anybody, but I felt all of that angst in the air. I think it's powerful, right? Like, how have you seen that affecting trauma in rehab centers?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it depends on like how much access the clients have to news and all of that kind of stuff. And we certainly do not try to limit them from understanding what's happening in the broader context of the world. I think they, every time a new client comes in, we see that fear kind of come up a little bit. It's like,
oh, wow, right.
This person's coming in, they've got them in a mask, they're putting them in their own room. We don't know if he or she is positive or negative. Are they okay? And so a lot of just kind of trying to manage that about like, don't assume that, somebody's sick. At the same time, I think that we, in the first stages, kind of like you were talking about, Chris, a lot of that was coming through in our staff. They were worried, they were scared, they were looking to us for how the leadership team for like, how are you going to keep us safe in this work environment? And, we were trying to figure that out too. I think just the, one of the toughest things I think for any of us who have experienced trauma are these sort of unknowns. I feel safe when I know. And the truth is that nobody knows just yet what is going to work we're all just kind of in the same boat together. I think it's been certainly difficult for the families. There have been instances where, they're like, we don't understand why you guys continue to admit people to your programs, like stop admitting. I understand that, right? I absolutely.
Again, listening audience, we are accepting referrals and inpatient facility. Right. It's like, yeah.
And so with that, I mean, we did for a time, have some admissions restrictions on certain places or things like that, just because one, we had the state travel ban, and then two, we're playing a game of probabilities. But again, this trauma thing comes up, and I think one of the hardest things for some of the clients has probably been the inability to really get out and move around. Because our normal program would include, taking them sometimes to 12-step meetings, taking them on outings into the community, taking them to Whataburger to get a hamburger, a lot of those things.
Whataburger?
Do you guys have Whataburgers down there?
No, man.
Oh, man, you're missing out.
Hey, I just had a Big Mac. Does that count?
Well, there's two of them, right? There's Whataburger. What's the other one? There's two burger joints on the West Coast that we don't have.
White
here.
Castle?
Is
Well, y'all
Whataburger
got West Coast, they have In-N-Out. Yeah, so there's
In-N-Out burger? Yes,
Yep.
I think that's the one. Is that the one with the secret menu?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, golly, that's good. We got to get that here.
Yeah.
Went to Arizona about a year and a half ago, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In-N-Out's good. Whataburger's my favorite, though.
So I'm aware of the time a little bit. Let's begin, Craig. I want to get your summary thoughts and questions and all.
Did you say you don't shelter people from what's going on in the world? Is that what you said?
You know, we don't. I mean, we don't let them, you know, and I've encouraged the staff, and I've continued to encourage myself to not consume, you know, CNN, Fox, whatever your flavor, 24 hours a day. You know, when it first started, I was just constantly like, oh my goodness, what's happening in New York City? Look at this, you know, and not because, not because I didn't want to be compassionate and aware, and not because we don't want them to either, but you know, there's sort of
harmful emotional factors there.
Absolutely, you know, I mean, we're driving this level of trauma up for people that, you know, have family in those areas. They worry about them so we let them see what's happening. You know, I mean, they know, and we've been very forthcoming with them about what our protocols are. You know, if we have a positive case, we have not hidden that from any of the families or anything like that.
The transparency is important too.
Absolutely. You know, I mean, I can only respond to what I have information about, right? But I can react to what I think I might know or don't.
Right.
You know,
I was going to joke and say that 24/7 news channels are probably the cause of a lot of mental health issues in the world. So cutting that out might not be a bad idea.
It's not a joke.
And it kind of sucks that you can't get out too, because that's another thing, right? Sunshine and
exercise,
movement and exercise. Yeah. That's good for your mental state too. So it's a shame.
You know, we're fortunate that we've got land here, and so they've been out on our properties playing flag football and
cool.
Doing that kind of stuff. But in terms of, you know, getting them into a different environment, and letting them, you know, leave the premises, you know, that can over time start to feel a little confining and almost traumatic, particularly if somebody has experienced trauma around confinement in their life.
Yeah.
Craig, get ready to sum us up. But Mandy, I'm curious, you know, taxiing in here a little bit. Boy, I'm going to put you on the spot, ma'am, and I'm sorry, but maybe you already know because you've been sleeping about it and screaming about it and struggling with it. Testing has been fixed, but what are the – how do I want to ask this, right? Like, what are the outstanding needs that we have? What are the ongoing, maybe unaddressed problems? How we've obviously pivoted and recovered, right? But what are still the biggest things that come to your mind that just haven't been addressed yet, or you're still, you know, travel ban just got lifted. I understand you said that a little bit ago, but what do we really need to do at this moment, at this point? For inpatient rehab stays and such?
Well, I think, you know, with regard to COVID, that patience is probably the number one factor. I mean, there's probably not anybody in the country who hasn't said at least once, I'm sure ready for things to return to normal, you know, air quotations. And I think that, you know, as we begin to see restrictions lift nationwide, there is a tendency for inpatient rehabs to maybe move along that same pace. And the truth is that, you know, we need to be moving in a pace that is safe for our clients, and that's going to require a lot of patience, because we are, you know, not nursing homes, but we are similar to them in the same vein that we have a vulnerable population, many of whom have underlying illnesses, including, you know, immune compromising illnesses like HIV, hepatitis, and different things like that, you know, and
smokers,
and putting these smokers, asthma, you know, all kinds of high blood pressure, you know, and so we put everybody in a small confined environment, sort of like a nursing home, and the potential for spread is greater than it might be for, say, you, Chris, who, and I don't know anything about your office, but who may have, you know, 2 or 3 patients in there at a time.
Oh, yeah.
You can go behind it and spritz everything down and mist and clean. But, you know, we've got at any given time, you know, at the BRC facility, you know, for example, you know, we may have 25 men living together and working out together and, you know, sharing bathrooms and group spaces and all of those kinds of things. So patience.
Yeah, can I just
really
interject that I'm tired of Oops, sorry.
Yeah.
Did we get a lag? Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got a little lag. No, I was just going to interject, Mandy. I mean, I just need to, for my own mental health, say, like, I am tired of cleaning my office.
Yeah.
Spritzing it and
Clean,
cleaning it. And, oh, my goodness.
As clean as I've ever seen it.
Yeah.
I heard news today, and it'll change tomorrow because the news is changing. You know, like the mask thing. Fauci says wear a mask. The World Health Organization says don't wear a mask, and you know that changes. But they were saying that it is these when you spend long periods of time with somebody who's in a confined space, and they were saying that's why that's why Walmarts aren't spreading it, because people are just in quick contact. They're in and out. You know, there's a bunch of them. So it's these confined spaces like rest homes and facilities like yours where people are sick and they're with somebody for a long period of time. And they think now maybe that's how it's moving. So you're definitely right.
So Craig, what did you hear? What was new? What's left over in your head? We need to get moving, but what are you thinking over there, sir?
Fascinating conversation, and God bless you guys for continuing to try to help these people, because I know these guys do need help. If you listen to our shows about addiction, you probably hear me tell a story about being on a jury. I was on a jury a couple years ago, and the kid was I'm sorry, guys.
His cell phone is ringing.
Accused of selling drugs. One of the questions they were asking
now it's donging
was, do you know anybody that's been affected by drug addiction? And I lost count at like 20. So I know a lot of folks. So they need help, man. And God bless you guys, and especially the ones who volunteered to help those positive patients. That's good. That warms my heart, you know, to hear things like that. So thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for spending time with us tonight or today.
Well, thanks for having me. This has been a lot of fun. I love podcasts, and this is I think my first ever podcast. So
yay!
Oh, awesome.
We may have to have you guys back and get something going East Coast, West Coast style.
Well, hopefully it's not your last.
Right. So Mandy, I do something here in a second. It's confusing because we can't, when I'm sitting down with somebody in the studio here, I like to give a high five. And to me, it really signifies like, it's hard to share. It's weird to share. And so whenever somebody comes on and touches on anything that they're dealing with, I like to give a high five. So here in a second, we're going to do a clap to signify that on the count of 3. But I really agree. And I second what Craig's saying, man. I mean, you hear the unsung heroes, and I just have really felt like in a lot of respects, mental health and substance abuse workers are in front line of this thing. And, the courage that it takes to deal with your own fear while helping other people is a real deal. And, taking the risks with the illness in and of itself as well, particularly in rehab facilities. You're right. Mine is much easier on an outpatient facility, but still all those outpatient therapists and stuff, man, like, hats off to you, and thank you for what you're doing. And thank you so much for being on our show and sharing with us.
Thank you. And same to you guys for helping get the word out.
Are you ready for our high five clap sort of thing?
Ready.
On 3, 2, 1. All right. Good deal, man. Craig, are we done? What are we doing next? I think actually I got an idea of what we're doing next. Should I pop the information there, or you got anything to sum us up?
No, I don't have anything else to say. I think you can go ahead.
So actually, ironically, I think that if my show lineup is correct, we're going to go and hit follow this conversation up with absolutely another long-term care facility reality. The senior care facilities are so we're going to do a back-to-back here, and talk about what they're dealing with elder care and whatnot. So tell them how to click and share an episode and take us out of here. We'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, throughwiththerapisteyes.com. We have each show listed there. You can listen to it there or on any podcast platform. And you can also subscribe to our social media from our website. That's really it.
See you next week.